Cole had been a prisoner for 3 years. 3 years of cold cells, bad food, and guards who looked at him like he was an animal in a cage. They had captured his ship during a border skirmish, and they had kept him alive only because killing prisoners was considered wasteful. Humans, they believed, could at least be used for labor. They were tall and beautiful in a way that made uncomfortable. Their skin was silver, like polished metal, and their eyes glowed with soft light. They lived for thousands of years. They could read minds. They had conquered half the galaxy while humanity was still figuring out fire. To them, humans were primitive creatures who had somehow stumbled into space before they were ready. So when the warden came to with an offer, he knew something was wrong. "You will serve as a bodyguard to Princess," the warden said. His voice carried the usual contempt. "Protect her during her diplomatic tour. Complete this task and you will earn your freedom." Stared at him, "A bodyguard? You have thousands of soldiers, why me?" The warden smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "The princess requested something exotic. A human guard will show the other noble houses that she is bold and unconventional. You are a decoration, Commander Cole, nothing more." Understood then. This was not an honor. This was a punishment for the princess, and he was the joke, but freedom was freedom. He accepted. Princess was young by standards, which meant she was only 400 years old. She had her mother's silver beauty, but there was something restless in her eyes. When was brought before her, she looked at him the way someone might look at a stray dog. "So you are my new protector," she said. Her voice was musical but cold. "I expected something more impressive." Said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was safer than words. "Can you even fight?" asked. "I have heard that humans are violent by nature, but violence and skill are not the same thing." "I can fight, Your Highness," said simply. She waved her hand. "We shall see. Stay close to me and try not to embarrass yourself." The diplomatic tour took them across a dozen worlds, walked behind the princess like a shadow. He watched everything. He learned the names of the noble houses and the ways they schemed against each other. He studied the guards and noticed their weaknesses. They were proud and graceful, but they had never faced real danger. Their civilization had been at peace for so long that they had forgotten what war truly meant. The other nobles mocked for her human pet. They whispered behind their hands and laughed when walked past. One lord even offered to buy him, like he was a piece of furniture. Refused, but could see the shame in her eyes. She regretted her decision to ask for something different. Did not care about their mockery. He cared about doing his job, and something about this tour felt wrong. There were too many new faces, too many nervous glances. Someone was planning something. The attack came on, a small moon known for its crystal gardens. The reception was held in a great hall with walls made of living glass. Hundreds of nobles gathered to drink and talk and pretend they liked each other, stood near the door, watching. The first sign of trouble was the silence. They communicated through telepathy as much as speech, and when the mental jamming field activated, they all went quiet at once. Their faces showed confusion, then fear. They had never been cut off from each other before. The assassins came through the windows. There were 12 of them dressed in black, moving with the speed of professional killers. They carried plasma weapons and blades that glowed with deadly energy. The guards reached for their weapons, but they were slow. They were used to coordination, to knowing what their allies would do before they did it. Without their telepathic link, they stumbled over each other. Did not stumble. He moved before his mind had time to think. He grabbed a ceremonial blade from the wall and threw himself into the path of the first assassin. The blade caught the killer in the throat and was already spinning to face the next one. He broke a chair over an assassin's head, took the dead man's weapon, and kept fighting. The nobles screamed and ran. The guards tried to organize, but they were too slow. Was not slow. He was a human, and humans had been killing each other since before they had discovered fire. Violence was in his blood, in his bones, in every fiber of his being. And right now, that violence had a purpose. He killed 3 more assassins before he saw the real threat. 2 killers had broken away from the main group. They were heading for Princess, who stood frozen near the back of the hall. Her guards were dead at her feet. Ran. The first killer turned and fired. The plasma bolt hit in the chest, burning through his uniform and into his flesh. The pain was incredible, like being touched by a star, but had been hurt before. He had been shot, stabbed, beaten, and left for dead. Pain was an old friend. He did not stop. He crashed into the first assassin and drove his blade through the man's eye. The second assassin raised her weapon but was faster. He grabbed her arm, twisted, and heard the bone snap. She screamed, and he silenced her with a quick blow to the temple. The remaining assassins saw what had happened. They saw this human, this primitive creature, standing over the bodies of their comrades with blood running down his chest. They hesitated. It was enough. The guards finally organized and opened fire. The last of the assassins fell. Stood over the princess, swaying on his feet. His vision was going dark, and he could feel his blood pooling on the crystal floor. But he was still standing. He was still between and any threat that might come. "Your Highness," he managed to say, "are you hurt?" Stared at him with wide eyes. She had never seen anything like this. She had never seen someone fight with such fury, such complete disregard for their own life. She had never seen someone bleed for her. "No," she whispered, "I am not hurt." "Good," said, and then his legs gave out and the world went black. The last thing he heard was screaming for the physicians. The last thing he felt was her hands on his face, surprisingly warm. He had done his job. The rest was up to fate. Woke up in a room made of light. The walls glowed with soft blue energy, and strange machines floated around his body like curious birds. He tried to move, but his chest exploded with pain, and he fell back against the bed. A physician appeared beside him. She was older than the others had seen, with lines around her glowing eyes that suggested great age. She studied him like he was a puzzle she could not solve. "You should be dead," she said. "The plasma bolt destroyed 30% of your heart muscle. Any would have died instantly." Coughed and it hurt. "Humans are stubborn." "So I am learning." The physician touched a floating screen and felt warmth spread through his body. "Your species has remarkable biology, redundant organs, aggressive healing. Your immune system attacked our medicine at first. It thought we were trying to hurt you." She almost sounded impressed. "We have never treated a human before. You are teaching us many things." Closed his eyes. He was tired, more tired than he had ever been. But he was alive. That was something. Princess came to visit him every day. At first, she just stood at the door and watched him. She did not speak and did not push her. He understood that she was trying to make sense of what had happened. Her entire understanding of humans had been shattered in 40 seconds of violence, and she needed time to rebuild it. On the third day, she finally spoke. "Why did you do it?" Turned his head to look at her. She was wearing simple clothes today, without the jewelry and flowing robes of her station. She looked younger, more vulnerable. "Do what, Your Highness?" "Save me." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You could have run. The contract said you would be freed if you served me for the duration of the tour. If I had died, the tour would have ended. You would have been released." Considered the question. He had asked himself the same thing during the long hours of recovery. Why had he thrown himself in front of a plasma bolt for someone who had treated him like a pet? Why had he risked everything for a princess who was embarrassed to be seen with him? The answer, when it came, was simple. "Where I come from," he said, "a man's word is his bond. I said I would protect you. That was the end of it." Stared at him. "You nearly died for a promise." "I have nearly died for less." She sat down in the chair beside his bed, and for a long time she said nothing. Could see the thoughts moving behind her eyes. She was trying to understand a creature that would sacrifice itself for something as simple as a promise. The maid promises too, but their society was built on telepathy and shared consciousness. Breaking a promise was almost impossible when everyone could see into your mind. They had never needed the kind of personal honor that humans had developed. "You are strange," finally said. "So I have been told." She almost smiled. "I think I mean it as a compliment." Word of the attack spread through the empire like fire. The assassination attempt on Princess was bad enough, but what truly shocked the noble houses was how it had been stopped. A single human, unarmed and wounded, had killed 7 trained assassins while the guards stood frozen. The security recordings were, and shared 1,000,000 times. Everyone wanted to see the human anomaly in action. Military scholars studied the footage. They watched Move and tried to understand his tactics. But there were no tactics, not in the sense, had not followed a plan or coordinated with allies. He had simply reacted, using instincts that had been carved into human DNA over millions of years of survival. He had fought like an animal, and he had won. The Empress summoned him to the throne world. Empress was ancient even by standards. She had ruled for 6,000 years, and she would likely rule for 6,000 more. Her palace was built on a mountain that touched the clouds, and her throne room was large enough to hold a small city. When was brought before her, he felt like an insect facing a god. The Empress was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Her silver skin was flawless, and her eyes burned with cold intelligence. She studied for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she was reading not just his mind, but his soul. "You saved my daughter," she said. Her voice echoed through the vast chamber. Bowed his head. "I did my job, Your Majesty." "No, you exceeded it. My guards failed. My security systems failed. Only you succeeded." She rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him, forced himself not to step back. "Among my people, such a debt creates a bond that cannot be broken. When someone saves your life, you owe them a life in return. This is the oldest law of my civilization." Did not like where this was going. "Your Majesty, I do not ask for any reward, only the freedom I was promised." The Empress stopped before him. Up close, she seemed less like a god and more like a very old, very tired woman who had seen too much. "You are no longer a prisoner, Commander Cole, that I can grant you, but I cannot release you from my service." Her eyes held something that might have been regret. "The debt my daughter owes you is now the debt of the Imperial House. You belong to us now, not as a slave but as something far more binding. You are part of this family, whether you wish to be or not." Felt his heart sink. He had fought for freedom, bled for it, nearly died for it. And now it was being taken away again, wrapped in the language of honor and obligation. "And if I refuse?" he asked quietly. The Empress smiled, and it was the saddest smile had ever seen. "Then you would dishonor my daughter, who has already told the entire court that she owes you her life. You would shame the imperial house before all the noble families, and you would prove that humans have no understanding of debt or loyalty." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But you will not refuse, because I have read your heart, Commander Cole. You are not a man who runs from obligation. You are a man who carries it, even when it breaks you." Said nothing. There was nothing to say. The Empress was right. He was trapped again, but this time the cage was made of gold. Had been given a title that had not existed for 10,000 years, Imperial Protector. The words sounded grand, but they meant nothing. He was a human in a palace full of creatures who had conquered the stars while his ancestors were still living in caves. He was a novelty, a curiosity, a puzzle that they could not solve. His quarters were larger than any home he had ever known. The walls shifted colors based on his mood, and invisible servants brought him food and drink whenever he wished. He had access to the royal gardens, the great libraries, and any entertainment the empire could offer. He was treated with respect, even fear, by the palace staff. But he was not free. Could feel the eyes on him wherever he went. The noble families watched him with suspicion and resentment. To them, He was an insult to their civilization. A primitive creature walking the same halls as their empress, eating at the same tables, breathing the same air. Some of them whispered that he should be killed quietly before he could spread his barbaric influence further. Others were simply curious. They approached him at social gatherings and asked questions about Earth, about human customs, about the strange way his people lived. Answered when he could, but he was careful. These were not friendly conversations. They were interrogations dressed in silk. Princess was different. She sought him out whenever she could, asking questions that had nothing to do with politics or power. She wanted to know about human families, human love, human art. She was fascinated by the way humans could hate each other and love each other with equal intensity, sometimes at the same time. "Your species makes no sense," she told him one evening as they walked through the crystal gardens. "The flowers here glowed with inner light, and the air smelled like honey and starlight. You fight wars over invisible lines on maps. You kill each other over which god to worship. And yet you also create music that makes me weep and poetry that touches my soul." Smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had felt in months. "We are complicated." That is an understatement. "Would you prefer us to be simple?" Considered the question. "No," she finally said. "I think I am starting to understand why the universe finds you so interesting." She began teaching him about society, and he taught her about human nature. He showed her how to throw a punch, which scandalized her guards. She showed him how to navigate the deadly waters of court politics, which saved his life more than once. They became something that neither of them had expected. They became friends. But the shadows were growing longer. Empress began summoning to private meetings. At first, he thought she was testing him, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. But her questions were not about weakness. They were about strength. "Tell me about human wars," she said one night as they sat in her private study. The room was filled with artifacts from 1,000 conquered worlds, but her eyes were fixed on, not the battles, the reasons behind them. "Thought carefully before answering. Humans fight for many reasons, Your Majesty. Land, resources, power, revenge. Sometimes we fight because we are afraid. Sometimes we fight because we are angry. And sometimes we fight because we believe we are right, even when we are wrong. And you keep fighting, even when you are losing. Especially when we are losing." The Empress leaned back in her chair. She looked tired, realized. Not physically tired, but tired in a way that went deeper. The tiredness of someone who had lived too long and seen too much. "My people have forgotten how to fight," she said quietly. "We have machines to protect us, shields to deflect any attack, weapons that can destroy planets. We have not needed warriors for generations. Our soldiers are administrators in uniform. They know strategy and logistics, but they do not know how to bleed." She looked at with something that might have been desperation. "When the assassins attacked my daughter, our guards froze. Not because they were cowards, but because they simply did not know what to do. Violence was something that happened to other species in distant parts of the galaxy. It was not supposed to touch us." "But it did," said. "Yes, and I fear it will again." The Empress stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city stretched to the horizon, glittering with lights that had burned for thousands of years. "There is a rot growing in my empire, Commander Cole. Someone is moving against the throne. I can feel it in the whispers that stop when I enter a room. I can see it in the eyes of nobles who smile too widely and bow too deeply." Joined her at the window. "Do you know who?" "No, and that terrifies me more than anything. My telepaths cannot find the source. My spies report nothing. Whoever is behind this knows our weaknesses perfectly." She turned to face him. "That is why I need you." "Your Majesty, you think differently than we do. You see threats that we miss. You act when we hesitate." Her glowing eyes held his. "I did not keep you here as a decoration, Commander Cole. I kept you because I believe you may be the only one who can protect my family when the storm finally breaks." Understood then why the Empress had truly bound him to the imperial house. It was not about debt or honor. It was about survival. She had seen something in the security recordings that no one else had seen. She had seen a weapon. And she needed that weapon now. "I will do what I can," said. The Empress almost smiled. "I know you will. That is what frightens me about your species." She paused. "And what gives me hope." That night could not sleep. He stood at his window and looked out at the alien stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning through the void, unaware that one of its suns had become a piece in a game played by gods. He was still a prisoner in a way, but now he had a purpose. And that made all the difference. The attacks came faster now, and each one was more clever than the last. First, it was the atmospheric processor in the princess's private wing. Someone had introduced a slow poison into the air supply, something that would have killed over weeks without anyone knowing the cause. Found it only because he noticed a strange taste in his morning water. Human senses were crude compared to telepathy, but they worked when technology failed. Then it was the shuttle. A routine flight to a nearby moon became a death trap when the navigation system locked onto a collision course with an asteroid. The pilot panicked and froze at the controls. Had to knock him unconscious and fly the shuttle himself, using skills he had learned in a war that seemed like a lifetime ago. The third attempt was the closest. A sniper with a long-range plasma rifle hidden in a building across from the palace gardens. Saw the flash of light a heartbeat before the shot was fired. He threw himself at, tackling her to the ground as the plasma bolt burned past her face, close enough to leave a scar on her cheek. They fell through a glass window and dropped 3 stories into an ornamental fountain, held against his chest, twisting his body so that he hit the water first. The impact drove the air from his lungs, but she was safe. She was always safe, as long as he was breathing. The Security Council held meeting after meeting, but they accomplished nothing. Their telepathic networks had been compromised somehow. They could not trust the thoughts they received from each other. Every lead they followed turned into a dead end. Every suspect they investigated turned out to be innocent. Watched them argue and plan and accomplish nothing, and he felt something cold settle in his stomach. These people had forgotten how to fight. They had forgotten how to survive, and their enemies knew it. He requested a private meeting with the Empress. She looked older than the last time he had seen her. The stress of the assassination attempts was wearing on her, and for the first time could see fear in her ancient eyes. "You have a suggestion, Commander Cole?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Took a deep breath. "Give me 10 humans, soldiers from your prison camps, people who know how to fight, really fight, not just give orders to machines." The Empress raised one silver eyebrow. "You want me to arm prisoners?" "I want you to give them a reason to fight. Right now, you have an enemy who understands how to think. They know your communication networks, your tactics, your weaknesses. They have planned for everything you might do." He leaned forward. "But they have not planned for humans. We are unpredictable. We are irrational. And we are very, very good at violence when we need to be." The Empress was silent for a long moment. Could feel her thoughts pressing against his mind, searching for deception, for hidden motives. He let her look. He had nothing to hide. "You are asking me to trust your species," she finally said. "No, I am asking you to trust me. I have already shown you what I am willing to give for your family." Another long silence. Then the Empress nodded. "Very well, Commander Cole. You will have your humans. Choose wisely." Went to the prison camps personally. He walked through rows of cells, looking into the eyes of men and women who had been captured in skirmishes along the border. Most of them were broken, their spirits crushed by years of captivity, but some still had fire in their eyes. Some still looked like they were ready to fight. He chose 10, 5 men, 5 women. All of them had been soldiers before their capture. All of them had survived longer than they should have. When he explained his offer, they listened in silence. "Help me protect the royal family," said. "Fight beside me, and when this is over, you will have earned passage back to Earth." A woman named Sarah spoke first. She had been a sergeant before her capture, and 3 years of imprisonment had not dimmed the steel in her voice. "And if we die?" "Then you die fighting instead of rotting in a cell. You die as soldiers, not as prisoners." The 10 humans looked at each other. Then, one by one, they nodded. They trained for 3 weeks, taught them everything he had learned about technology and tactics. They practiced fighting in the palace corridors, learning every corner end. They developed hand signals and code words, ways to communicate that could not be intercepted by telepathy. The guards watched them with a mixture of fear and disgust. These humans moved like predators, alert and dangerous even when they were resting. They did not fight with grace or elegance. They fought like animals, using every dirty trick and brutal technique they could think of. The attack came on a night without stars. The enemy had infiltrated the highest levels of command. When they moved with overwhelming force. Hundreds of soldiers in stolen uniforms flooded into the palace, their weapons blazing. The telepathic networks went dark. The security systems went offline. The royal guards found themselves fighting blind against an enemy that knew every secret passage and hidden door. But the humans did not need telepathy. They did not need technology. They had been fighting in the dark their entire lives. Led his team through the chaos like a blade through flesh. They moved room by room, corridor by corridor, killing anyone who stood between them and the royal family. The enemy had expected tactics. They had expected hesitation and coordination and careful planning. They had not expected 11 humans who fought with the fury of cornered wolves. The battle lasted 6 hours. 3 of soldiers died holding a near the throne room. They stood in a narrow corridor and killed 40 enemies before they finally fell. Their names were James, Maria, and Thomas, and swore he would remember them forever. When the fighting finally stopped, the palace was silent except for the groans of the wounded. Stood in the throne room, his weapons empty, his body covered in blood that was mostly not his own. The empress and princess were safe behind him, surrounded by the surviving humans. The leader of the conspiracy was on his knees before them. High Admiral, one of the most respected commanders in the empire. His face was twisted with hatred as he looked at. "You have doomed yourselves," spat. "By relying on these primitives, you show the galaxy that the Empire is weak. Other species will see this. They will know that the mighty need humans to fight their battles. Our civilization will crumble." Walked toward him, stepping over the bodies of fallen enemies. "Maybe," he said, "but not today." He raised his weapon. The Admiral's last expression was one of disbelief. He could not accept that his great plan, his perfect conspiracy, had been destroyed by creatures his people considered barely more than animals. But that was the thing about humans. They always found a way to survive, even when the universe said they should not. The days after the battle were strange and quiet. The palace was filled with workers repairing the damage, soldiers investigating the conspiracy, and nobles whispering about what had happened. But notice something different in the way people looked at him now. The fear was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer the fear of something disgusting and alien. It was the fear of something powerful. Respect, that was what he saw in their eyes. Respect. The conspiracy had run deeper than anyone had imagined. High Admiral had spent decades placing his people in positions of power throughout the empire. He had believed that they had grown soft and weak, and that only strong leadership could save them from eventual destruction. His plan had been to kill the Empress and her heirs, then present himself as the only one capable of restoring order. He had planned for everything except 11 humans. The surviving members of his team were treated as heroes. Their wounds were healed with the best medicine. They were given quarters in the palace, and treated with honors that had never been offered to any human before. The nobles who had once mocked them now bowed their heads when they passed, but could see the restlessness in their eyes. These were soldiers, not courtiers. They did not know how to live in peace. On the 7th day after the battle, the Empress summoned all of them to the throne room. She looked better than she had in months. The fear that had haunted her eyes was gone, replaced by something that might have been hope. She stood before her throne instead of sitting on it, which had learned was a sign of great respect among the. "You saved my family," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "You saved my empire. This debt cannot be repaid with words or titles, but I can offer you something that I know you want." She paused and felt his heart begin to beat faster. "I offer you passage home. A ship will take you to Earth, where you will be released with enough resources to live comfortably for the rest of your lives. The Empire will never trouble your people again. This I swear on my throne and my blood." The humans looked at each other, could see the longing in their faces. Earth, home. The word felt like a dream, like something from a story told to children. They had given up hope of ever seeing their world again, and now it was being offered to them like a gift. Sarah stepped forward. "Your Majesty, may I speak?" The Empress nodded. Sarah looked back at her fellow soldiers, then at the Empress. "We have talked about this, all of us, and we have decided." She took a deep breath. "We do not want to go home." A murmur went through the watching nobles. The Empress raised one silver eyebrow. "Explain." "For 3 years we were prisoners. We were treated like animals locked in cages, forgotten by the universe. We had no purpose, no meaning, nothing to fight for." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "But here we are warriors. We are protectors. We saved an empire. Our names will be remembered long after we are dead. Why would we give that up to go back to a world that does not even know we exist?" The other humans nodded, felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had not expected this. He had assumed they would all want to leave, to return to the familiar skis of Earth, but they had found something here that they never had at home. "Purpose." The Empress turned too. "And you, Commander Cole, do you share the feelings of your soldiers?" Did not answer immediately. He looked around the throne room, at the silver faces watching him, at the glowing walls that had witnessed thousands of years of history. He thought about Earth, about the blue skies and green fields he had not seen in so many years. He thought about his family, who probably believed he was dead. And then he looked at. She stood beside her mother's throne, her hands clasped in front of her. The scar on her cheek was still visible, a thin white line that would never fully fade. She was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Hope, perhaps, or fear. Turned back to the Empress. "Your Majesty, where I come from we have a saying, home is where you make it." He paused, feeling the weight of the moment. "I have made a home here, not because I was forced to, but because I chose to. Your daughter is my friend. Your people have become my people, and I am not finished protecting them." He knelt, not as a slave or a prisoner, but as a man who had found his place in the universe. "If you will have me, I would like to stay." The Empress smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine, and it transformed her ancient face into something almost human. "I was hoping you would say that, Commander Cole," she gestured, and a servant brought forward a small box made of crystal. Inside was a medal, a silver star surrounded by a circle of light. "I am creating a new order, the Human Guard. You will be their commander. You will answer only to the throne. Your purpose will be to protect the imperial family and to teach our people the strength they have forgotten." She pinned the medal to his chest. "Rise, Commander Cole, rise and take your place." Stood around him, the other humans were smiling. Even the nobles were nodding their heads in approval. Something had changed in this room in this moment. The universe had shifted just a little. Princess stepped forward and took his hand. Her skin was cool against his, but her grip was strong. "Welcome home," she said softly. looked at her, at the woman who had once seen him as a pet and now saw him as an equal, perhaps something more. "Thank you, Your Highness." She smiled. "My name is—" The Empress watched them with ancient eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. She had taken a risk, bringing humans into her palace. She had gambled everything on a species that most of her people considered primitive and dangerous. And she had won. "I have one more thing to say," the Empress announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Let it be known throughout the Empire that humans are no longer to be treated as prisoners or slaves. They are allies, friends, and protectors. Any who harm them will answer to me." She looked at, and something passed between them, an understanding, a promise. "Humanity came to the stars as captives," she said, "but they will not remain so. They have earned their place among us, and I suspect they are only beginning to show us what they can do." Thought about the long road that had brought him here, the years of imprisonment, the blood and pain and sacrifice, the friends he had lost and the friends he had found. It had been worth it. Every moment of suffering had been worth it. Because he had found something that most people never find. He had found where he belonged. And he was home,